So I wanted to share with you what I explain to organizations and try and get you to think about where we're going with a different lens. I'm going to be sharing with you a bunch of different things. One of them I'm going to do is a cycle that we're going through, a massive cycle that we are ending. And I'm going to take you through the process of where we've been as humanity, where we're going, and what the new skills are that we're going to be needing to actually add value to the world ahead of us. And if you think this is hard for you to do, think about your kids. Because we all know that many schools today aren't teaching our kids what they need to know in the future. And the poor schooling system is clueless because they don't know what to teach the kids of the future. And so you might think this information is a bit tough for you to take on as an adult, but for your kids, it's something to integrate into the family so you can do it together, because you'll be competing with your kid over the next 20 years for income. And so you all need to be evolving in this sort of way. The second thing I want to do is I want to show you a brand new business strategy that I have started to see bubble up. And it's an incredible business strategy, and it's eating the market in its sector and really taking on some big boys at their business models and decimating them. And then I'm going to talk to you about my favorite subject, the neuroscience that's required to see the world in a new way. I've just spent 2 weeks with Dr. Joe Dispenza in Mexico, and I learned so much about neuroscience, so much about the way we can change our brains to see the future in a new way. And we all hear this cliche saying, you have to unlearn to relearn. But the truth is, who the hell knows how to unlearn? And that's what I want to share with you today is, I've got some real tool sets to help us unlearn to be able to relearn what we need to in the future that we're coming or going towards. Now, what I did tell Mark is I'm going to do tonight's talk for free. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring exclusive books to sell my latest book so that you guys, if you wanted to buy it or not. And they phoned me at 4 o'clock and so they sold out. They got no books left in any of their stores to come and sell. So I didn't feel like that when I heard it earlier. I was pretty pissed off, but well, that's what it is. I can't do anything about it. So let's get stuck into today's subject. And the subject that we're going to be, oh shit, I didn't take the slide out. Okay, let me very quickly tell you what I do. I was going to take the slide out. Damn it. So what I do is I call myself a futures strategist, and I think that's important to highlight. I have a plural future, which means that we have an infinite number of futures to work towards. I think we all get caught up in an apocalyptic future that we're moving towards. And we find it easier to complain about this apocalyptic future than to actually change ourselves. And so we get caught up in complaining and complaining and complaining, and there's very few people actually doing anything to evolve themselves so they can be one step ahead of whatever you're complaining. And that's why I wrote the book. It's called Who Do We Become? Because the question isn't, why is the world changing so much? Is why am I not changing at the pace that the world needs me to change so I can add value at that state? And that's the real thing we need to be asking ourselves. It's much easier to be angry than it is to be sad. And so we stay angry. We don't want to go into the sorrow. And so I'm going to explain all of this as we go through today, because there is no future. There's only here and now. And the way we actually think about the future in the here and now impacts the future. And so we all think, because we're doom scrolling or watching news or any of these things, that everything's against us. But the truth is, lots of people are making lots of money and adding some serious value, and some people are just stuck in the past. And so I want to take you on this journey into the future. And so futures means there's multiple futures for us to move towards. So don't get caught up in the idea that there's one terrible future that we're moving towards. Also, I'm a Singularity faculty member in San Francisco. Here we look at technology. Some of my colleagues do some incredible things. One of them has set up a 3D printer in the space station. They never have to take another tool up into the space station. Another one has decoded the genome and created CRISPR-Cas9 with some Chinese professors and a lady in the States. So some incredible people that I get to tap into, and I'll be sharing with you some of the latest technology around that to show you where we're actually heading, so that when you do see it eventually, you're not too scared of it, but you also become ready to embrace it, because you have no choice really, like all of us are in the same boat. I'm also an associate partner of Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies in Denmark, and here we study societal changes. And obviously Denmark being quite a sort of socialist country in a way, it's a big time about the rights of people. And they do a lot of research around this, and I really get to tap into some amazing people that work with the UNESCO Future Literacy Program and doing some just amazing things out there. So I'm going to share some of this with you as well today. I've written and co-authored 10 books, and I do this because whenever I commit to writing a book, I listen to everything, I read everything 3 times. The first time just to listen to it, the second time to ingest it, and the third time to digest it so that I can actually start to share it. And I always recommend that everybody writes at least one book in their lives. It changes the way you engage with the world because everything starts becoming a data point that you can actually engage with. So you actually become a much better learner when you want to teach it. I've also got a podcast called The Expansive Podcast, so if you want to join us on that, that'd be really great, and I'm across all social channels. But like I said, I didn't want to have the slide, and I can't believe I left it. But let's get stuck into tonight's topic. The topic is obvious. We are going through an incredible transformation as humanity. And we are unfortunately at the end of this major cycle. And what happens at the end of every major cycle is there's an implosion, a death, a destruction, and a sort of breaking away, an unraveling of everything that we once implicitly trusted. And this happens pretty much every 80 years. And if you think about everything we once trusted, I remember when I was a kid, my mom and dad used to go shh at 7 o'clock because the news was on. Remember that shit? And today we don't even believe anything they're saying because it's all propaganda. We understand that now. You remember when we used to go to school and get guaranteed for a job when we finished school? Today you can have 2 degrees and have no guarantee whatsoever. You remember when we used to get, I got married and divorced, so I can't remember getting married forever. But you used to get married and it used to be forever. That doesn't really last anymore at all. And so every kind of touch point, even the dollar, and we can see how much they've printed over the last 18 months. And we're like, all of a sudden, hang on a second, that's like a house of cards. So it's almost like everything that we're looking at is almost imploding. And this is really very much part and parcel of the process. And I don't think we need to panic about it, but really realize this is the stage that we're in as humanity. But no matter how small or how big a transformation is, it always starts off with the first phase. And the first phase is always about anguish and sadness. And it's about anguish and sadness because we're leaving the shore of familiarity. We're leaving our comfort zones. We're leaving sometimes even our identities to begin the journey, the hero's journey towards who we need to become. And we leave the shore of familiarity kicking and screaming. We don't really want to be leaving. We want to evolve, but we don't really want to leave our comfort zones. But COVID-19 has forced us. And now we have began the journey whether you like it or not. You're now in the middle of the sea because once we leave the shore of familiarity, we arrive at the strange, the wilderness, and the abnormal. And I'm going to share with you some of the abnormality that we are going to be facing over the next sort of 10 years or so. And we need to become ready for this abnormality. We can't keep going, oh my God, I can't believe that's happened. Oh, I don't even want to engage with that. Oh, I don't even understand that. You're only doing this at your own peril because the strangeness, this wilderness, is very much part and parcel for us to get to the adventure that we are going to. And we will eventually start an adventure again. But humanity today is between the anguish and the abnormal. That's where we are. That's why, as Mark said, corporates don't know their arse from their head because nobody does. Nobody really does. Governments don't know. Nobody knows what's going on. Because once was things that we had structures in place to manage are breaking down. They don't work. And if you think about democracy, for example, what a crock of shit. Think about the Senate in America. Think about our government here. Think about the government in the UK. It's almost like all of it just seems like it doesn't work. It's like children and adult bodies fighting with each other. Right across the board, across all of these things. So I don't want us to panic because all of this is going on. This is part of the cycle that we're in. And if you think about it, everything in our society, a comfort monitor would help, Mark, eventually. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm on the right slide. Okay, sure. So our society that we have built, our educational systems, our corporational systems, is very much addicted to certainty. If you ever pitch anything to a corporate, what is the first question they say to you? What's the ROI on that? We need absolutes. We can't do anything out of an absolute. And I love it because most organizations call themselves agile. How can you be agile and addicted to certainty at the same time? We must all experiment because that's what we must do as teams, but nobody experiments because you can't, because you've got to reach the month end and you've got to have your budgets in place and you've got to make sure you get your bonus, and it's all based on an addiction to certainty. And so the first thing we must do collectively is admit that we're addicted to certainty so we can unhook ourselves from the addiction to certainty, because there is no certainty the way we're going. I loved what Elizabeth Elizabeth from Eat, Pray, Love. What's her name? Elizabeth Gilbert. She says, you never had control, you only had anxiousness. And we all want to hold on to this control, but there was no control. There was no guarantee of anything anyway. Just right now, everything's topsy-turvy. And if you think about the neuroscience of this addiction to certainty, our brains actually love predictability. Our brains don't like unpredictability because our brains and our bodies want to become habit machines as quickly as possible. And the minute they can become a habit, it doesn't have to think about it, it does it automatically. And so anything new that comes in, your brain doesn't want to actually engage with it. So you have to try extra hard to think about things that are uncertain. And that's the real tough part that we're having as humans at the moment, is that our brains don't even like all this change. Even though we want to have it, we just don't like it. Intrinsically, we don't like it. But we don't really have a choice. And UNESCO's Future Literacy Program calls the issue that we're having right now a poverty in reimagination. And UNESCO Future Literacy Program sits in Paris, and what they are doing together with Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies is building curriculum for high schools so that the kids at high school can learn skills to categorize, contextualize, and build future strategies. It's something you can actually learn. And so they're building these out, and they've created this sort of paper, a mega trend called a poverty in reimagination, because humanity is so keen on holding on to the old world and so not keen to imagine possible and probable futures that we could be moving towards. And you know, in a world of corporations, in a world of business, we never give any kudos to imagination. Imagination is not going to pay the rent. Like, what must we do with imagination at all? But the truth is, if you're not thinking about what's coming next and you're just stuck into repeating yesterday's issues, problems, and challenges, you're stuck in a loop you most probably don't even like. And so imagination becomes a very important thing for us to start tapping into. So, if you are in a crisis of meaning, you're not alone. And I think that's important for us all to understand. Right across the board, from not enough oil and petrol for it to be too expensive, to not have electricity. China is having rolling blackouts. I don't know if you know this. I was working with Mr. Price a few months ago. Their factories are working 1 day a week. 1 day a week. Not bad for Eskom. And so there's a lot of issues. It's not an Eskom issue. It's not a South African issue. It's a global issue. I was in America just now, on my way to Mexico. The airports are a disaster. Disaster. You've all seen what's happening in Heathrow. People they've told no more than 100,000 people a day or a month. That's it. We're not taking anybody else, canceling thousands of flights. It's a disaster everywhere. So this is a crisis that we're in at the moment, and I think we need to become okay with it and make peace with it. There's no choice that we have at the moment. So let's start off with the big cycle that I've been tracking. And I want us to take this journey of understanding the cycle as human beings and understand where we've come from, to understand how we need to evolve into the next phase. So a few hundred years ago, we were agricultural beasts. And in the agricultural times, what we did and what we were taught to do for hundreds of years was follow our forefathers. What our forefathers did, we would repeat and we would be successful. And in fact, the agricultural times created civilization as we understand today. And in this process of agricultural times, the real key was for us to understand the cycles of seasons. You know, before that, we were just stumbling around and all of a sudden we were cold and all of a sudden we were hot. But now all of a sudden people started to understand there were actual seasons so they could plant according to those seasons. And we had to follow our forefathers, follow the seasons, and toil the soil. That's what we did for hundreds of years, made us successful, created civilization, as I explained. But what started to happen then is we moved into a sort of place of accessing horsepower and manpower. And horsepower and manpower saw us become very successful for hundreds of years. But then we moved into the industrial times. And in the industrial times, we saw a massive shift, because all of a sudden it wasn't about following your forefathers anymore. The rules started to change. And the rules started to change because all of a sudden there was a system for us to follow. And the factories replaced our bodies. So the physicality that we required in the agricultural times all of a sudden became null and void in the industrial times. And in the industrial times, what we had to start doing was start to realize that because of the discovery of new power sources, we had to start making total changes to the skill sets we had as human beings. So coal power, steam power, nuclear power, petrol power, all of these things replaced cow power, horsepower, manpower. And all of a sudden, what we had to do was start to develop new skills. And these new skills that we had to start developing are really only about 200 years old. And we went to school and we went to sort of tertiary education to learn IQ. And in fact, we have a Mensa member here. Brad is a Mensa member. And even as a society, we have for the longest time celebrated people with high levels of IQ because that's what got people to become successful. And in that process, we increased our knowledge by going to more degrees and getting more courses and understanding more things and just developing more logical thinking, more analytical thinking. And so for 200 years, this has seen us become very, very successful. But we're about to enter a new phase. And in this new phase, what we realize is we've moved from follow your forefathers, follow the system. And as we move into this quantum age, we move into follow your uniqueness. And you know, when I was a kid, I had 4 options growing up. You know, you finish school, then you could become a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or a failure. That was it. There was no other choice. And we were exposed to so few careers. You know, the fact that you didn't enjoy any of them was irrelevant. That's all you had to go and do. But we've arrived at a surplus society where we have a surplus of sameness. People across the world have been all trained and educated in similar things, doing similar jobs, creating similar products, similar services, and similar companies, and everything seems to be commoditized in many different ways as we look at the world. And in this new world, we're starting to realize that our logical brains, our analytical brains, the IQ that we've spent so much money developing is being replaced by technology. By artificial intelligence, by blockchain and decentralization, by data, by machine learning, and by data science. And so all of a sudden, the skill sets that we've been developing for 200 years are starting to become irrelevant. And this is the problem we're having, is that this analytical thinking, this logical thinking, is not creating the solutions that we once were getting. So we try harder, we work harder, we put more hours in, but we're actually utilizing the wrong tool. These AI systems, and I'm going to show you some examples, are doing some massively incredible things. Things that we thought would only come in 5 to 10 years have already started to arrive. And so we have to evolve ourselves, just like agricultural people had to evolve themselves. And remember, if you went back to the agricultural times and you said to one of the farmers, Koos, you need to learn Excel, but Koos would look at you like you're Chinese, because he wouldn't understand what you're talking about. Just like I'm going to explain to you, the skill sets that are required in this new world are things that you don't really think about because they don't make sense in a world of industrial revolution. And these new skill sets that we require is intuition, creativity, and fascination. And if you think about it, if you just look at our bodies, we went from muscles, brawn, to brain, to heart. We're evolving. We've gone from beasts that work the fields to thinking like robots to feeling like humans. And so for actually the very first time, we're moving into a state of creativity. And so before I tell you what intuition is, because that's the real sort of target of this talk, is to get you to understand that to develop this new skill, this will become the currency of the future. Right now, it might not mean much, although there is something called the passion economy or the creator economy that's worth $8 billion already, and is going to be doubling exponentially over the next few years, where you have these individual people selling their products and services across the world using Shopify and manufacturers across the world, one-man bands, maybe two-man bands, making a lot of money, not needing to have staff and to have jobs or any of those sort of things. So it is growing, but it's not imperative to do straight away. And like I said, for your kids, for them to start picking up these skills will be really, really smart, because over the next 10 years, this will become the currency that we have. But before I tell you about intuition, let's start talking about how the world that we understand it is changing. And again, just to give you the context of why developing this new skill is so important, we must realize that everything that technology touches becomes free. And we might not think this is realistic because we might think that many things are becoming more expensive, but let's not forget that we don't pay any money for music anymore. $5 a month for Spotify that tells you what music to listen to is really it's nothing compared to remember how much money we used to spend on CDs? Was that Orange? What did you say? This is old people. Yeah, Orange, I don't know. We old people, yeah, okay. So I remember, I was so proud of my CD collection. It was just amazing having a CD collection, right? Today you pay nothing. Don't forget that you used to pay lots of money to get your photos printed. Today you pay nothing. And don't forget that you used to pay for education, and today Mark and I are educated by YouTube, and I travel the world doing this, educated by YouTube. Because I don't really read, even though I write books, I'm just continuously taking in a mass amount of information. And I think YouTube is very underrated and is really the university of the future in many, many ways. And also remember that entertainment used to cost us money. We used to go get DVDs and videos, and now we don't pay anything for it. So let's not forget how technology has already shifted so many aspects of our lives. And we're about to have technology touch pretty much every product and service as we move into the future. This is Jeremy Rifkin. I've spoken about him a lot. In fact, I got Mark to show Jeremy Rifkin's Third Industrial Revolution YouTube documentary. And if you haven't watched it, please go watch it, because for 90 minutes, this Jeremy Rifkin character, who's a global economist and advises China, Germany, and the EU around preparing for the Third Industrial Revolution, he explains in 90 minutes that what we're going to start seeing over the next few years is communication becoming free, which has kind of happened. I was doing a conference for Vodacom, and Shamil stood up and said, we've had to change our whole business model because of one app, WhatsApp. One app. Changed the whole telco industry around the world. And then went from selling airtime and voice to becoming a digital transformation partner. So that's just one app, right? So communication already has moved into that space. The second thing that's going to start becoming free is energy. Thank the Lord. Now, it's very difficult to think about energy becoming free from this viewpoint, because we don't quite understand the digitization of how that's going to work. Just like I couldn't explain to you how music was going to become free when we were buying CDs, and I couldn't explain to you how education was going to become free when we were paying all those incredible prices for universities. So these things happen, and technology will start taking over it. And also, obviously, transportation will be the third pillar. And these are the pillars that hold up capitalism as we understand it. And capitalism in itself is eating itself because of the efficiency it's been driving. And this efficiency is actually eating capitalism as we understand it today, because all of these products and services are starting to become free. Now, everything I've spoken to you so far has got nothing to do with artificial intelligence. And I want to show you two things that have happened with artificial intelligence over the last, one of them about a few years, and the other one about 6 weeks. And artificial intelligence has all of a sudden really spiked exponentially in its level of intelligence. And the first one is a product called GPT-3. I don't know if you guys know about GPT-3. Just show of hands, who knows about GPT-3? 2 people, 3 people. Okay, we're going to have a lot more authors after tonight, because my industry has just been totally disrupted. And so GPT-3 is an original text AI-powered platform. What you can do with GPT-3, it's working, bro. Sound's working. This is not even supposed to have sound. Please turn the sound down. I don't know why it's got sound. What was wrong? Okay. So GPT-3 has this it's incredible. So what you can do, right now you can go and do it. There's so many platforms that use GPT-3. It's an open source free platform. And what you can do is put an article title in there. And you can say, for example, I want to know about 14-year-old boys that play football in the townships that have deformities, and I want it in a comedic fashion, and I want 10,000 words. 4 seconds, you have a 10,000 word essay printed and done for you. I know your job's gone, darling. So this is done, and so you take that context and you copy and paste it and you put it into Google. It's never been written before. This is available right now, and you can go to hyperwrite.ai and you can test it for yourself. I've already used it, not on my book, but I have already used it. And I think I should have used it on my book, because it would have been cheaper, faster, and better, and even maybe more intelligent than my book. So that's GPT-3, right? And that's become now widely available. And you know how much it costs, did I just say? Nothing. Nothing. No copywriting, none of that, all this sort of stuff. And right now it's GPT-3, next year will be GPT-4, and then GPT-5. And you know how technology works, gets smarter, faster, and cheaper as we start moving into the future. Then we got something called DALL-E 2 that was introduced about 6 weeks ago. Anybody heard of DALL-E 2? Show of hands? Okay. DALL-E 2 is about to disrupt ad agencies in Hollywood. And what DALL-E 2 is an original platform that creates original art. You can type into DALL-E 2, I want picture of Sudanese woman carrying water in the deserts of Dubai in a Bart Simpson fashion, and within 4 seconds you have 30 different options. Original artwork, which is highly intelligent. And if you keep looking, you'll see that, I don't know if you saw the robot that's created a new language. I don't know if you saw that, but it said, have a robot that that's teaching a new language. Within 4 seconds, it created a new language and put a robot next to a board and started writing it. So if you think about where this is going for us, is DALL-E 4 and GPT-6. What you can tell GPT-6 is, I have a daughter that's 12 years old. She loves to BMX and skate. She loves dinosaurs, dogs, and the color purple. Please write me a movie script that would make her the hero, and she uses courage and bravery to develop her hero sort of characteristics. You take that original movie script, you put it into DALL-E 4, and you have a brand new movie, personalized for your daughter. And it cost you nothing, and it took 4 seconds to make. The reason I'm saying this to you is that, do you understand that the skills we once had are irrelevant? And will slowly but surely become more and more irrelevant. And then we wake up, and what we've been doing for the last 4 years is complaining, not evolving. And then something just got launched a couple weeks ago, and this has got nothing to do with AI, but I think it's crazy. This is called Somnian Space. And what they're doing with Somnian Space right now is you can start having AI read your social profiles. Take your favorite photos, voice clips, video clips, and create a full character in the metaverse of you. And so when you die, your family can visit you in the metaverse. Now, don't joke, because the guy who invented this his dad was dying, and he didn't want to miss his dad, so he created this avatar of his dad, real-life avatar of his dad, with the same conversational processes and the same sort of engagement processes, and added that into Somnium, and it helped him heal the passing of his dad. And so we have such crazy things that are starting to happen around us. And what we have to realize is that the sooner we start engaging with new ways to bring value to the world, we won't have the time to complain. And that's my biggest issue and stress. And I've even had words with Mark. I don't want anybody complaining. There's no need to complain. Focus all that energy on developing yourself, increasing your consciousness, and adding value where you need to. There's no need to complain. It's all breaking. All of it's breaking everywhere. I travel a lot. It's all breaking. It's just that's where we are in the space of humanity. But let's think about how this affects business, because we're all here to make money, and I'm also a capitalist just like you, and I want to understand how I need to set up my business to be able to flourish in the world we're going to, where technology is making everything commoditized. So this concept here is really about us starting to understand the new business models that are starting to evolve. And this process is called moving from a complicated world to a complex world. And there's foundational differences. The world we come from is complicated. The world we're moving into is complex. And so I'm going to give you 2 examples of businesses that are doing this new complex type of business model, and it's a totally different structure. So let's start off with complicated. Complicated, the world we come from, has patterns that repeat themselves. This is called a production line. That production line that started off the Industrial Revolution was really turned upside down, or not upside down, bottom up, to become a corporation and an organization. It's exactly the same principle. It's patterns that repeat themselves, got us addicted to certainty, and to make sure that we have net profit at the end of the month, and that becomes the only driver for a business that has patterns that repeat themselves. That's why most CEOs are CAs, because in this world that patterns repeat themselves, we need mathematics, Excel spreadsheets, and accountants to develop and understand strategies for the future. And this made sense because we could have 5 and 10 year business models, no problem, and we could just repeat that process over and over. And this process is eventually automated with narrow artificial intelligence. In other words, technology and artificial intelligence and data always commoditize everything inside the system. Just like I said to you, capitalism is eating itself because of the efficiencies that it's brought about. But here's the foundational breakdown of this complicated process: is economies of scale and efficiencies. Businesses today have always been running on economies of scale and efficiencies. And this is really the bloodline of all businesses. The more profit you make, the less your costs are. This is how you make money. But as we move into this new complex world, we start to realize that the rules are changing. And the rules are like this, because in the world we're moving into, the complex world, we have some patterns, but they don't repeat themselves. It's uncertain, like I was explaining to you. Everything's breaking down. So we can't actually use mathematics, Excel spreadsheets, and accounting to understand the future, because it's not in a straight line. It's in everything but a straight line. And those old skill sets aren't working anymore. Like I said, logical, analytical thinking is not going to get us to where we're going. And there is no automation or technology that's quite figured out complexity yet. You know, DALL-E 2 can make art, but it can't make coffee. And a Tesla can drive a car, but it can't write an essay. So AI is very narrow in its intelligence. We are the general intelligence. That's why we have to start evolving ourselves, because we are the ones who are not becoming commoditized in this complex world. If you're still analytical and logical, you will become commoditized, because that's what technology is doing. But here is the foundational difference. Oh man, come here. Sorry. Oh my God. I have to go through all of them again. So here's the foundational difference, is that we went from economies of scale and efficiencies, and now we're moving into something called economies of learning and robustness. This is a very different structure that I'm starting to see around the world, and this new structure of economies of learning is really what's going to set apart businesses that are agile. Economies of learning is all about agility. Economies of scale is all about repeating patterns that we once knew. Now, when we go into uncertainty, you can't keep repeating patterns. You have to become agile. So when organizations say they're agile, they want to be agile. I don't think they don't want to be agile, but just don't know how to be agile, because the structures they built on don't allow them to be agile. So I'm going to give you two examples. Remember when we used to travel a lot, and we are starting to travel a lot again, thank goodness. When we used to get to the airport, we used to put our bag onto the conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt was a complicated process because it was a pattern repeating, highly efficient, technologically advanced, hardly any people, commoditized process. Because our suitcases used to get to us on the plane, unless you had Heathrow, on the plane 99% of the time, utilizing a complicated process of pattern repeating, highly efficient, technologically advanced, hardly any people attached to it. And I think it's a bloody miracle that these things even happen. I live in Dubai, I'm in that airport in and out a lot, and there's thousands of people coming through there, thousands of flights, and I've always had my suitcase. So this complicated process using technology works really, really well, but it's highly commoditized. There's hardly any people involved in that. And so the world we come from is a conveyor belt. And this is the kind of thing that we need to understand. We have been on a conveyor belt for 200 years. But the minute a plane gets up and flies and gets into the air, now we are in a complex world. And the foundational differences is that you have no idea what's going to happen to you up in the air. It's totally uncertain. So what do? Is you over-prepare. You're robust in your services. And what you do is you have 3 pilots when 1 is enough. You have 4 engines when 1 is enough. You have 18 operating systems when 1 is enough. And so planes are actually built with complexity and uncertainty in mind. That's why they're the safest way for humans to travel from point A to point B. And the world we come from is the conveyor belt. The world we're moving into is the airplane. And this becomes very, very difficult for us to understand, because it takes away the whole idea of economies of scale. Because then how do I have 18 different businesses, John, and how do I actually create profitability when I've got so many sort of I can't think of the word, so many different strategies running around at the same time. But again, that's a viewpoint that we are taking from this perspective. And so I want to explain to you how a business has come out of nowhere and is eating everybody's lunch in its sector. You all know a business called Zara, right? Zara is the poster child of fast fashion. In fact, Zara, when it came out with its new business model, changed all clothing brands. Everything from the cheapest clothing brand to Louis Vuitton became a fast fashion brand. We realized that the more newer pieces of clothing we had inside our stores, the more people would shop. I mean, who would have thought of that? Remember when we used to go to the shopping centers when I was a kid? There was always the same clothes. We never even thought about why they were the same clothes, because you only shop twice. There was summer and winter, then there was spring, summer, autumn, and winter, and then all of a sudden you have H&M and Zara, 22 new drops every 2 weeks. There's something new inside the shop. This became the norm, and it's now kind of the norm around the world. But all of a sudden, Zara has become old, and we have a new kid on the block called Shein. Now, most men have no idea what that is. No offense to the stylish guys over here. But Shein, you know, I started hearing about Shein about 8 months ago, a year and a half ago. And I thought it was pretty interesting what they're doing. I'm going to explain to you their business model now. But they are built on economies of learning, not based on economies of scale. Where Zara's business model, as efficient and genius as Zara is, and I don't want to take anything away from them, they built on an old business model called economies of scale. And I did some strategy work with Mr. Price, and they had done exceptionally well, but also shitting themselves at the exact same time, because there was this new app that was eating their market right in front of them. And in fact, Shein is starting to eat market share across the world, across all clothing brands. And so before I tell you about Shein, let me just tell you about the genius of Zara, and let's not forget about how clever they are. Zara is able to take new products to its stores twice a week to 1,670 stores around the world. It's incredible. I don't want to take anything away from them. They also are able to add 10,000 new styles to their stores every year. Again, unbelievable. That's 300 styles a day. It's just really an incredible logistical feat that they are accomplishing. But I want you to remember this number of 10,000 a year, okay? And then ultimately, it takes them 10 to 15 days to take clothing from design to store. And they've got some ships on the water, and these ships sew on the way. So they load them up with material. They have all these people sewing on the ships. And as they arrive at the port, the clothes are ready with tags, with everything, and they just take them straight into the store. It's a genius business model, except it's just dated. So if we think about Shein, and here's the crazy thing, Shein is not even a clothing store and not even a clothing brand. What Shein is a social media and data management business that outsources its clothing manufacturing. Just get your head around that. They are eating the clothing business. They're not even a clothing brand. They're a data management business. And the guy who started off selling wedding dresses from China and got really good at SEO and started to become better and better at data and better at SEO, and all of a sudden started to realize there was this huge market out there that nobody was tapping into. And so what economies of learning means is that I don't do one thing until I've learned what my customers want, and then I do something. That means I can have 35 different options, but it hasn't cost me anything because I'm waiting for you to tell me what I need to do. So what do? They take the pictures of clothing across social media that's been liked and shared the most, and then they take those pieces of clothing and computer generates 10 different options in 20 different colors and put it onto their website. And on a daily basis, they're able to add 10,000 new products every day. Zara did 10,000? A year. Calm down, but you work for Zara. Are you not listening? But good try. So all of a sudden, what Shein has done, Shein is able to give you 10,000 new options every day for how much cost? 0. They've got AI scraping the internet, creating these algorithms that is able to give us the options that we can choose from. And when you place your order, they start to manufacture. They haven't spent 1 cent yet. Only when you pay, do they pay. They haven't spent any money. Economies of learning, not economies of scale. Robust in our expression of products and services, not efficient. Efficiency is 20 minutes ago. And so what they're able to do is send you these pieces of clothing at sometimes 70% cheaper than Zara and H&M, because there is no retail rent. There is no retail staff. There is no shrinkage. It's direct to consumer. And there's actually Instagram pages now that I've started to see open up that show you a pair of shoes from Zara and the same pair of shoes from Shein at 60% cheaper. And so you thought when Zara and H&M arrived, you're like, oh my God, how can it be so cheap? And now all of a sudden it's gone even cheaper. Why? Because they become an economies of learning business, not an economies of scale business. And this really becomes a very tough thing for us to start to understand and get our heads around. And what happens to us most of the time is we have a brain that hurts when we get taught these things. And in fact, what happens is we get triggered. I call this process a trigger point trap. And I've spoken about these trigger points before, but I think we need to speak about them many, many more times. Because the thing about trigger traps is that we get caught up in ways of thinking about change unconsciously. We don't even know that we are being triggered. We don't even know that we're moving into victim mindset because it's so natural for us to do these things. So I'm going to take you through 3 different scenarios of the neuroscience of why it's difficult for us to evolve at the pace of what technology is evolving. And I hope that these tools give you an opportunity to catch yourself so that you don't fall back into the patterning that you've always been stuck in without even knowing it. So you in a day go through thousands and thousands of different relationships. And I don't mean with other people, I mean the relationship with your body, the relationship with money, the relationship with your car, with your phone, with the potholes, with your clothes, with your colleagues. All of these are relationships that you have, meaning that every time you engage with them in one of 2 ways, only in one of 2 ways. Either from a naive mindset or a mature mindset. And many times we are stuck in a naive mindset without even realizing it. And let me give you the characteristics, and then you'll see exactly what I mean. So the naive mindset, or the drama triangle, or the survivor consciousness is what it's called, is really got three characteristics. The first characteristic is the victim. Poor me, I can't believe this is happening to me. It's because I'm a man. Oh, no, it's because I'm a woman. No, it's because I'm tall. No, it's because I'm short. No, it's because I'm fat. It's because I'm thin. We can choose any topic to feel victimized by. And we know that orange man that was in America a few years ago, a billionaire, top of the strongest country in the world, and a deep victim. Always a victim. It was unbelievable. So your background means nothing. And so we have two types of victims. You can feel sorry for yourself or feel entitled for yourself. And both of these are victims. And we have this right across the world in many different ways. And often we don't even know we're doing this because it's so natural for us to automatically click into this personality trait. We also have the savior. And the savior is the person who's always feeling sorry for the world and really does nothing about it, but just feels sad. And then wants to phone all their friends and also feel sad together. And we all sit there in a pity party, feeling sad for the world, eating extra ice cream and complaining. Now, I'm Middle Eastern, and our grandmothers are professionals at this. If you've ever seen a Middle Eastern or Indian grandmother that's not sick, please help me, I need help. It's unbelievable. It's a cultural nuance. But we go about feeling sorry for ourselves and the world, but really not doing much about it. This is called the savior, or the sympathetic person. And then what we have is the angry person who's always angry about everything. Addicted to taking offense with everything that happens around them. The rugby, the electricity, the price of chips, everything. People are addicted to being angry all the time. It's how they approach life. And if they're not being angry, then who are they? I once did a talk in Dubai, and I spoke about Cairo. Anybody been to Cairo? What a shit show that traffic is. I mean, it's unbelievable. Look, it works. I don't know how it works, but it works. So I just made a calm comment about it was like a passing comment. I had one Egyptian guy waiting, and I was signing books, and he was waiting for me. And I was like, maybe, I don't know, he wants to talk to me about something. So I'm like, yes, hi. He's like, how dare you? Dare what? How dare you talk about my country? Anyway, I was like, shut up. I ignored him because he's just addicted to feeling offense. And so when you finish watching the news, and when you finish getting off your own pity party or your own anger sort of soapbox, you realize that you're stuck to who you were, not who you need to become. And so if you're stuck in this drama triangle without even knowing you're stuck in it, which is the most dangerous thing, you're not evolving. You're not asking the biggest question of who do you become to meet this future where it needs you to be. You're more interested in who you were than evolving to who you need to become. And when I started doing the research on this, I started to realize how many places I was stuck in this drama triangle. And I write about positivity and optimism and brand new strategies. And I was stuck. And I didn't even know I was stuck. And I'm going to give you a story right at the end of this about how I unstuck myself and what the result was. But there is a radically different way to look at the world. And the most important thing is just to become aware of the fact that we're stuck in the drama triangle. And so if we think about a new way to think about the world, to move from a drama triangle to a creator triangle, to move from a naive mindset to a mature mindset, we realize that the first thing we have to do is not see problems, but see opportunities. So this idea that we see the world through a creator perspective becomes an incredibly powerful, front-footed, optimistic approach to look at new invisible dots that you can connect to make profit of, to add new value to the world. And in some aspects of our lives, lots of us are creators. But in many aspects of our lives, we're stuck in being victims of it without even knowing it. The second characteristic is to move from sympathy to empathy. Oprah is a great example. She doesn't have time to complain about what's going on to the women around the world. She built schools for women to uplift them. She doesn't have time to complain. She's too busy doing something about that thing. So next time you're complaining, ask yourself, am I doing something about this complaint, or I just like complaining about it? And then you have the challenger. The person who challenges themselves, challenges their community, challenges their town, their country to be better, to think brighter, to lift their perspective, to try and see a solution rather than sitting in the same crap and complaining about it. And so in my world, and you might have heard me say this because I've said it on social media a couple of times, in my world, the more famous you are, the more money you make. It's just the way it goes. And who's on top of the pops is that bastard Simon Sinek. You see where my hook was, right? So, Simon Sinek makes a couple million rand a talk, and I'm not kidding, and he can't keep up. And here I was in my own little sulk bubble. Private, because it's embarrassing to tell people that I had a sulk bubble around Simon Sinek. Because I am successful, but I'm just not that successful. And so every time I saw Simon Sinek's LinkedIn post with 52,000 bloody likes, please stop liking his LinkedIn posts, I would feel sorry for myself and I'd feel angry with the world. And my excuse in my head was that I don't live in America, that's why I don't have his attention. That was my story. And I would tell nobody, Mark, we're close. I've never told you that story once. But this was my own story that I had going on. And guess what? I didn't even know I had the story. And so there I was stuck in my own loop of feeling angry with Simon Sinek and feeling upset with Simon Sinek because I was stuck in my own drama triangle. There was many others that I'm not going to share with you, but this one I want to share with you. And so what I started to become is hyper aware of this. And I didn't want to be stuck in a victim mindset. And so over the next few weeks, I started to change and self-regulate, which I'll talk about just now, self-regulate myself to catch myself and to change. Catch myself and change. Stop and change. And that constant process, you start to rewire and refire neurons inside your head and you start to see the world differently. But you have to put work and effort into it. And 3 weeks later, I got a call from Gartner to go and do a talk in India. And I did all the paperwork and arrived in India, and guess who was backstage? Simon Sinek. And he opened for me. I'm just kidding. He just did the talk before me, and I did the talk after him. So, just to let you know, that throughout our lives, what we do is we go through thousands of relationships. Some of them de-energize us, but they're familiar, so we feel comfortable in doing them, complaining like little bitches. And I'm talking about the guys, not the women, God forbid. Or, in some parts of our lives, we're super creators. And we're so energized. But we somehow get caught. And unfortunately, the world, and many times in South Africa specifically, Israel, the UK, Germany, it's a pastime to complain. It's cultural to bitch. Why? It keeps you stuck. You're not evolving. You're not moving from naive to mature, from survival to creator. And so we have to become aware of these things, and they do change very, very quickly. So let's get back to intuition. You understand the world's changing? You understand we need to engage with a new skill set? And I want to take you through my understanding of what intuition is. And these are the things that we can do with our kids. Because if we do it as a family unit, it becomes easier for us to all engage with this new skill set, because this is going to be the currency of the future. And so, what is intuition? Quick show of hands. Who thinks they know what intuition is? Geez, all of you, eh? Go on. Your inner voice. Very good. It's I guess your gut feel. Sorry? Unconscious mind. Yes, it is an unconscious mind, yeah. So think about it. If you had a bad experience with a dog when you were 4 years old, your gut feel tells you that all dogs are dangerous. Is that true? No, you're an idiot if you don't like dogs, but that's just my perspective. But what I'm trying to get at is that the very first step for us to become intuitive is for us to heal our trauma. Because if you want to have true gut feel, intelligent sense of what the world is around you, you can't be carrying your old self with you. And so the very first thing we need to be doing is developing a personality of wisdom. And wisdom is somebody who has memories with no triggers. Can I get a hallelujah? I'm joking. I just had somebody in the front. And don't we love being with wise people? Because nothing triggers them. And we somehow fall away from this idea that whatever's triggering us is just something from the past that we haven't dealt with. And so I did an extensive amount of work trying to deal with healing my past. And this makes me more fluid and optimistic about the future quite naturally. I've used this quote 1,000 million times, and it just makes so much sense. It's Alan Watts. He says, the knowledgeable man has to learn something new every day, but the wise man has to unlearn something new every day. And so we're living in a world where, as intuition becomes the currency of the future, it's an emotional process. It's not a logical process. And so we have to start developing this muscle of wisdom, of consciousness, of awareness that comes from here, not from here. Because I tell you what, if you think you've forgiven somebody, you haven't. Because 3 years later, you smell that same cologne and you're like, that bastard. I'll never forget that disgusting smell. And you'll be triggered right back there. And Dr. Joe Dispenza says it best. He says, never try and forgive anybody. Raise your consciousness, and that person will fall off you. It'll be irrelevant to you. And I've got many stories around that, and that's why I keep doing work with him. Because he's like, don't be constructive and logical in the way you think about the world. Get a sense of an emotional state around the world, because that's what intuition is. And so the second thing we need to think about when it comes to intuition is making decisions based on fascination. You know, school was never about making decisions on fascination. If you made any decisions based on curiosity, you were sent to the principal's office. No, but come here, do algebra. Come here, learn history. And it's not about curiosity, fascination, and excitement. That's for after school. Right now, you must be miserable, bored, and be like just irritated that you have to even sit here. I feel sorry for kids. It's prison. I can't even sit still for half an hour. Now you're asking kids with so much energy to be sitting still with all those hormones rushing. It's impossible, really. And so what we realize, and Eleanor Roosevelt said it best, I think at a child's birth, if a mother could ask a fairy godmother to endow it with the most useful gift, that gift would be curiosity. Guess what? They're all curious anyway. We kick it out of them. They're not allowed to be curious. They must fit in, not fit out. They mustn't follow what makes them most excited. They must follow what the book tells them to follow. And so we all have it inherently. We've just been trained out of it. The third thing that we need to be focusing on when it comes to intuition is imagination. To form a concept of reality that was never there before. And like I explained to you earlier, is imagination is something that we haven't used as humanity at all. And we don't give it any kudos. And if we think about it, what we do imagine is the worst future. Because that's what anxiousness brings. That's what complaining brings. Is that you're actually creating a world you don't like. And you keep talking about it, and you keep creating it. And then you tell your friends, I told you so. I told you that pothole is going to get one of my tires. I told you. And so we realize that our imagination has actually been used against us. And if you think about how powerful imagination is if you ever wanted to buy a car and then you see that car everywhere, that's called imagination. You thought about it, you started looking for it. You wanted problems, you found them. You wanted a new car, you found it. You complain about men all being useless, you keep finding them. And you complain on social media, where are all the good men? Well, they're nowhere near you, darling. You still looking? Okay, but get out of that drama triangle and into the creator triangle, and then you can find one. Thank you for admitting that. It's the first step to healing. So imagination takes us from a process of where have I been to where am I going? And so it's the process of thinking into the future, not dragging the past with us to create this our own bubble of reality. You know, I lived in Cape Town for many years, and I lived on the 6th floor of my apartment, which was Mark's Airbnb. And my neighbor on the 7th floor, Dan, the man, used to always tell me that there was incredible drug wars in Sea Point. I never saw any. He was 1 floor away from me. He was constantly with the cops, with a camera, with rocks. I was flying business class around the world earning dollars. I was like having the time of my life. 1 floor. He was 1 above. I was on 6th. And so we realize that your imagination and what you look for becomes so powerful. And I'm going to explain the neuroscience after this to tell us how we can go about learning and unlearning and why are we stuck in these loops that we don't often even like. And then finally, experimentation. Without the addiction to outcomes. As humanity, we don't want to experiment too much because it doesn't fit in with our addiction to certainty. We want to experiment, but not too much. Our organizations say to us, go out there and be agile and experiment, but not too much. Come back, make sure the profit is right first, and then experiment a little bit. Tell people you're experimenting, but don't really experiment. And so we realize that the skill set about intuition is something we've actually never even thought about. And then finally, meditation. And I'm going to take you through the process of understanding meditation and the science behind meditation. And if you are somebody who here tells me, I can't meditate, my brain is too busy, put your hand up. Too embarrassing now, yes. Okay, are you saying my brain is too slow? Is that what you're saying? You're saying I'm slow and you're just smart. So understand something, that meditation is the only way you can unlearn. There is no other way you can unlearn. And I'm going to explain to you the science of it. And I've been to 4 retreats with Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm on my way to do my 6th and 7th with him. Actually, I've done 5. I'm on my way to 6th and 7th in December for another 2 weeks. And he has developed, I don't know if you know him, but if you don't know him, please look him up. Watch his lectures, read his books, because he has taken science and he's proven to us how our brains work so that we can uncalibrate ourselves to develop new versions of ourselves to meet this future at what it needs from us. And so this is my most exciting sort of topic right now, because for many, many years, what I used to do was I used to speak to organizations about the future. And then I used to come back, and you know what had changed? Absolutely nothing. And then what we have is organizations that write new mission statements and new vision statements, and guess what changes? Nothing. Why? Because the people didn't change. And so every time we think about change, we want to do it on a broad term, but individually, we might want to change, but we don't know how. And so I want to explain to you how we go about changing. And this become so powerful for me that I'm starting to change so many aspects of my life, and I'm just catching myself, and I'm understanding the process and the formula. So let's get stuck in. We have 5 brain states, and it's all got to do with brain states. It's all got to do with how we perceive the world based on the state of waves in our brain that we have and that we manage throughout the day. That's as simple as it is, as complicated as it is. So you have the first brainwave, which is called gamma, and gamma is when you're having an orgasm. Guys, I know it's very quick for us. Women have much more gamma than we do, if you got the right man. But gamma is something that monks are able to, I like that high five there. I'll see you guys later. So, hey baby. So gamma is what we get with monks that have been meditating for 30 years. They can create gamma inside their heads. It's pure bliss. Orgasm touches us there, and you can work on creating a gamma brain state, but it's not really important for this process. Then we have the brain state called beta. And this is the analytical, I'm in trouble, I can't do enough, I'm always late, I'm anxious brain state. Sound familiar? Most of the world is stuck in high beta. And then you have another brain state just below high beta called alpha. And alpha brain state is the brain state that calms you, takes your focus from narrow focus to broad focus. Alpha takes the critical voice and switches it off. You start to imagine quite naturally. You become collaborative and you start to see the world in pictures. And you start to connect the dots that a beta brainwave cannot see. Because a beta brainwave is looking for danger, is anxious. And an alpha brain state is relaxed and looking for opportunity. And then we get the third brain state, fourth brain state, which is called theta, which is sort of that half awake, half asleep. And then we get delta, which when you're fast asleep, and that's delta. But I only want to work with these 3 brain states, and I want to explain to you what these 3 brain states do. So if we think about it, we have to move from a beta to alpha brain state to access intuition. If we are coming at the topic of intuition and getting our kids ready for the future in an anxious state, you've already started on the wrong foot. We have to almost relax our brains to move away from analytical to creative. And remember that anything analytical is already commoditized. It's called technology. Logical thinking, process-driven thinking is all technology that's taking over. So we can't even be more analytical. So we are pushing our analytical brains to the maximum end of it, and that's why we're so exhausted. That's why we are so finished with ourselves, and we can't even get away from ourselves, and it's all because we're addicted to being in a high beta brain state. And when you move into an alpha brain state, and this takes meditation, there's no other way unless you smoke bongs and joints, which really doesn't work. It does for a little bit, but it really doesn't work. But if you move from beta to alpha, you become more imaginative, your focus becomes broad in nature, and you suppress the critical voice inside your head. But what happens to us every day when we wake up, we have the same thoughts. And because we have the same thoughts, what happens is that we're stuck in the past. And what happens is that these thoughts that we had yesterday and the day before give us the same choices. And these same choices give us the same behaviors. And these same behaviors give us the same experiences. And these same experiences give us the same emotions. And these emotions give us the same thoughts. And it repeats. And so what happens is that our personal realities are created by our personal personalities. And our personalities is the way we think, the way we act, and the way we feel. And every morning when we wake up and we think and we act and we feel the same way, what happens is we get stuck in a loop. And we imprint this reality with the way we think, we act, and we feel. We get addicted to thinking and acting and feeling in the same way. And because it gets imprinted so much, because we do it over and over and over, eventually what starts to happen is your personal reality tells your personality what to do and when to do it. In other words, when you get into traffic, you get triggered in the same way. When you see that work colleague, you get triggered in the same way. And every time you watch politics, you get triggered in the same way. And every time you go over a pothole, you get triggered in the same way. And all of a sudden now, you're stuck in a loop that you don't even like. And you understand what is happening to us is that we are stuck in a program that we're just looping. We think in the same way, we have the same choices because of the thoughts that we've had, we then have the same behaviors, the same experiences, and the same emotional trigger points. And now all of a sudden, we're in a life that we can't even escape. And so we're stuck to being analytical and in high beta. And I don't know about you, but I definitely know many mothers that mother from anxiousness. And the reason they do that is they think they're being better mothers by mothering from anxiousness, which they're not. They're just addicted to high beta. And if they're always late and there's always too much to do and they can always never get round to everything, that's high beta. And the guys who can't meditate because your brain is so busy, because you're addicted to high beta. And you can only unhinge yourself from meditation. And so if we keep going, and to change, we have to do a bunch of things. And it's not easy to change. It's a process to change. And what we have to do is we have to move into something called no space, no time, nowhere. Anybody been there? You been there? When you meditate, you move from a place of high beta to alpha to theta. And in that space of theta, you're now nobody, nowhere, no time. Now you disappear from who you actually are. Because you are the problem. We are the problem. Because we're dragging our past with us in repetition. And so if we're able to get away from ourselves and move into that state of nobody, nowhere, no time, that's the beginning of the meditation. And so what most people do is when they start meditating, they have 1,000 different thoughts, 1,000 different thoughts, 1,000 different thoughts, and all of a sudden they go, I don't have time for this shit. I've got other things to do. Sound familiar, Jackson? Because you do have a lot to do. You've got 2 stores. I mean, that's a lot to do. But what starts to realize is that when you sit there long enough, you start to tame that wild stallion. Because you're not the boss of your brain. Your brain is the boss of you. And it's telling you that you don't have time to sit down. And so you have to sit down and ride this stallion out until you train it to get to a point of theta. And now that you're nobody, nowhere, no time, now that you can start thinking about a new version of you, a new intuitive aspect of who you need to become. And so we move on to the second piece, is you start to rehearse future behaviors. You know, sports stars rehearse putting in that hoop, that goal, whatever they do. They rehearse it thousands and thousands of times. Have you watched the Michael Phelps documentary? He talks about how many times you'd already seen him winning those gold medals before he even won those gold medals. He's rehearsed it. How many times have you rehearsed the new behavior? We don't. And so you be the same person. You can never evolve if you're not rehearsing what sort of behavior you actually need to bring to that day. And then what you do is throughout the day you become hyper aware of what's triggering you to your old self. So whenever I see a Simon Sinek post, I'm like, my man, 54,000 likes. I've self-regulated myself away from that trigger point of keeping stuck to my old self. And then you start to anchor new thoughts. Because now all of a sudden you remember that when you meditated in the morning, you had a new way to think about the world. And I've got a weird one, and I didn't even know I had this, and I only figured this out in Mexico when I was there a month ago. I've got this like a weird sense that I think I'm always in trouble. Anybody else have that? You always think you're in trouble. I'm like, when I see a cop car, I'm like, yo, whoa, and I haven't even done anything. I'm like, I've got nothing on me. I'm like, I'm fine. And then other people tell me every time their phone goes off, they're like, whoa, shit, I can't read that. What's happened? Like like on edge. And lots of people, like my friend Jasmine, I stayed at a house in Dubai, and every time I walked down the stairs, I had to tell her beforehand, Jasmine, I'm coming down, because if I had to come down, she'd be like scrick out of her body, because she always tense. We all have this. We're all on tense. And I realized that I'm always in trouble. Like I'm not even in trouble. I don't know why I always think I'm in trouble. But I only picked this up because I started to think about my unconscious thoughts and started to realize that, hang on, I don't want to be always in trouble. And I started to rehearse a new thing called safety. It's like, think about your body and think about being safe. How do you feel? You're like, whew. Guess what? You just moved from beta to alpha. And now you're relaxed. Now you can start seeing the world in a different way, where intuition becomes an option, a real option for us to start practicing. But expect resistance, because your body has become your mind. The wild stallion has become so in habit of acting and reacting to the world it does, that it doesn't like being told that it's not able to follow its addictions anymore. And so you have a lot of resistance from your body continuously. And you have to repeat this continuously over and over and over till we get to a point where we move away from a record of the past and we start moving towards a map of the future. And this becomes the critical thing for us to understand when preparing for the future, is the ability to meditate, the ability to silence the mind, to take that critical voice away, to start to think about the world in a more open-hearted way so that we can start to connect the dots that we otherwise wouldn't have seen. And ultimately, it's not an easy process. It's a very difficult process. But if you spend longer and longer complaining and longer not evolving, you're going to find yourself becoming more and more irrelevant and more sad and upset and angry. And so I'm going to start closing off now and just explain to you what has happened in our society, inside our brains. And this really comes from Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset. And what she says in it is, we've got to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And Satya Nadella got this book to be read by the whole of Microsoft when he joined. And he said, we're a know-it-all organization. We need to become a learning organization. And look what's happened to him and his organization. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Satya Nadella. He's adaptable. He's agile. He's collaborative. Guess what? He's in alpha brain state. Watch him talk. Obama, super chilled. Alpha brain state. Like relaxed, can see a broad picture. That's what all leaders need to be. And so if we think about what growth mindset really is, more than anything else, it's our ability to access dopamine. And there's two ways for us to access dopamine, intrinsically or extrinsically. We can either allow ourselves to access dopamine because of our own passion, because of our own intuition, our own fascination, or we allow the outside world to tell us when we can access dopamine. Bonus, likes, all these sort of things from the outside. And so what we have been suffering from as a society is something called the dopamine reward prediction error. Anybody heard of this? Anybody got kids here? And you told your kid, it's fantastic that you're studying for the exam. I can see you studying really hard. Next week when you write the exam, I wish you luck. And when you get an A, we'll go out for ice cream. Anybody done that? That's called a dopamine reward prediction error. And what we've told people is that you're not allowed to celebrate struggle. You can only celebrate outcome. You're not allowed to be celebrating and getting energy for going through the tough times. You can only celebrate it when you get an absolute outcome. And guess what? There's no absolute outcomes anymore. And so now what happens, we have a society that's depressed, anxious, frustrated, angry, stuck in the past, in a loop, and suffering from a dopamine prediction reward error. And so they did many different sort of experiments in this book. And two of them I want to share with you. They took these 10-year-old kids that loved doing art, intrinsically accessing dopamine. And they did art and they loved it, and they had things measuring their brains, and it was all awesome. And the teacher started giving them each gold stars. And as these kids started to shift from loving doing art and starting to do art for these gold stars, they went from an intrinsic value to an extrinsic value. And slowly but surely what started to happen is they just started doing art for the gold stars. And when the parents and the teachers started to take the gold stars away, they stopped loving doing art because the dopamine inside their head was gone. The Navy SEALs, they did a bunch of different tests with the Navy SEALs guys, and the ones that made it through the Navy SEALs were the ones who celebrated process, effort, and challenge. The ones who didn't make it through were the ones who were waiting until the end before they went through any process of celebrating the challenge. And so if we don't celebrate challenge, if we don't engage with challenge with energy and optimism, we don't access these neurons that give us the opportunity to be energized and to see the world more optimistically. And I think you've heard about this book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, but it's the same concept, is that if you're fragile, you fall, you break. If you're anti-fragile, you fall, you get stronger. And so you start to look for these challenges. You start to look to stretch ways that you think about the world. And it really all comes down from moving from a beta state to an alpha state. And when you're in an alpha state, the whole way you look at the world starts to change. And now intuition becomes obvious. Analytics becomes so 20 minutes ago. And I love this quote from Dr. Joe Dispenza. He says, are you living a life based on a set of memories from your past, or are you living a life based on the vision of your future? And most of us, without even knowing it, are in repetition of our memories. And we don't have time for that anymore. And this time that you have here, and if you take one thing away from tonight's talk, is this idea to seek discomfort. We are not in the state anymore of seeking comfort. I did a talk here a little while back called The Tyranny of Comfort. How when we seek comfort, we actually putting ourselves back because we're not in a time to seek comfort. This is a time to rewire and refire and to seek discomfort. Thank you so much for your attention.